Happy Week 12 Heat Seekers. We are back with your Week 12 wide receiver tiers. Let's see if we can get you some dubs, a cornucopia of victories, if you will. I think at this point in the offseason, or at this point in the regular season, we know what to expect with our high-end players. Any thoughts, comments, concerns here?
The one big thing we see off of this to me is that the assumption that Elijah Mitchell is going to be healthy and playing for the 49ers, because as we saw last week and even some of the week before, I believe that using Debo as a running back, which did limit the amount of opportunities that he saw in the passing game. So yes, he's still going to be a wide receiver in your league because you're not going to see shenanigans with him changing designations to make him more of a running back. So no concerns about that. But just his usage and how whether they're having him do more designed runs, which is going to limit potentially PPR upside and then opportunities in the passing game. So I think that is something to be cognizant of. The past 2 weeks, after failing to hit 9 targets only once, which was week 2, the past 2 weeks, he's had 5 targets and 2 targets as you're using him more of a running back, which again, we know that matters in terms of yardage, catching the ball, yards after the catch. He's been doing amazing this year, and then those PPR points. So that is something to me to take into account here.
Absolutely. Another one of your high-end must-starts each week are defined at this point. Does anything here strike you as out of the ordinary with Week 12 matchups that are coming up? Obviously, Thursday we have multiple games going, and throughout the weekend, there's a lot of action going on. Is there anything that concerns you out of this group?
Not overly. I think the game for the Chargers against Denver, it's a divisional game, and the Chargers, I don't think projecting them to, but Pittsburgh certainly won't lay down and just let them do what they want. But we saw that Chargers offense find its footing again on a defense that wasn't completely healthy, and they're going to have that same situation in Denver where they're missing pieces and going to have that opportunity to continue to right the ship that we saw out of them. So I do like it, although I don't expect those two guys, Keenan and Mike Williams, to probably end up both as wide receiver ones this week. CeeDee Lamb, of course, make sure you're paying attention to whether or not he plays on Thursday night. If he isn't, you don't have him in your lineup clearly, but we included him because the reports out of Dallas are that he's sitting in the team meetings and he's going to have a decent opportunity to play if he does clear that concussion protocol. It doesn't sound like it was serious, but of course, want to make sure that he's completely healthy before they throw him back out on the field.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because with Amari already out for testing positive with COVID and CD being in the concussion protocol, and there's still a chance that he doesn't play. He could, but there's a chance that he doesn't play. I mean, that really boosts Michael Gallup and Cedric Wilson's value if both of these guys are out. With the way this weekend slate looks like, there are a lot of favorable matchups for wide receivers, but I struggle with recent production with some of these guys like Cortland Sutton, my dude, but hasn't been targeted over the last few weeks, very much, if at all. I know he just got a big contract, but I could easily make the case that him and Judy are more wide receiver 2 than wide receiver 1, as much as I love both of those receivers. It's an interesting tier when we look at it. Injuries play a factor a little bit with some of what's going on in this tier. Matchups, what's your gut feeling with this wide receiver 1 group?
So if I had to guess, I don't think Judy and Sutton probably make it up into this tier. End of the week, the Chargers have not allowed a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers this year. There's a lot of guys to potentially pass the ball to, and we know that they like to try to run the ball as much as they can there in Denver. If I had to guess a couple guys to fall out, they're probably having a good chance to fall off here. I also think A.J. Brown, if he plays, which is not completely clear either, Bill Belichick, knowing that generally speaking, he tries to find something that they have a really nice weapon or something they do really well to take out of the game. Yep. Take him out of the game. They don't have Derrick Henry anymore. They've been struggling as is. So I think there's a really good chance if he plays, A.J. Brown doesn't end up in that. And Patriots have been quality in terms of their defense against wide receivers. So that's another one that I could see here. The Raiders, boy, especially if you assume CD doesn't play, I don't think Michael Gallup ends up as a wide receiver 1 because I don't think they're going to force him the ball, and there's a good chance he ends up with Casey Hayward on him. Casey Hayward's actually done well this year. The teams have had success running the ball and then with tight ends against the Raiders. So not saying that they'll only do that, of course, because the Cowboys offense takes whatever the defense is going to give them as much as they can for play calling. So there are some things in here that I see that potentially probably don't make it happen. And as we say week in and week out, the ceiling for Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown is a wide receiver 1 week, but you're not going to get, generally speaking, all of them to fit into there, especially with Rob Gronkowski back. So if Antonio Brown does end up coming back and playing, it's just spread around a little bit more.
T. Higgins has been a bit up and down this year. What does week 2 with Odell and the Rams offense look like? how comfortable are we with what's going on in New York now that they've dropped Jason Garrett? You know, it could be you've unlocked the offense to finally reach its full potential, and that could be a good thing for a Sterling Shepard or Saquon or some of these pieces. Could also be confusion and mass chaos for everybody because doing something different. Who knows? What's your gut tell you about this tier? Is there anything here that stands out to you, good, bad, or otherwise?
So for the first time when he's been healthy, we're really seeing the wide receiver ahead of Corey Davis in our rankings with Elijah Moore. I'm starting to use him more. But Corey Davis still has a potential with if they continue with Flacco opening up that offense to just chuck it down the field and pray for a pass interference or a big play, which Joe Flacco is so adept at. Aside from that, when you're sitting here looking at the things coming up here, the Packers, it'll be interesting to see how they hold up after that onslaught from Minnesota in the passing game, going against Cooper Kupp that we mentioned before, and then Van Jefferson and Odell. I wanted to ask you about him, Brad, as you're the one with the least favorable impression currently of Odell. Do you think he has any chance to come back to relevancy here with the new team, or you just hands off of him at this point?
I have one share of Odell in a dynasty that I've been trying to trade, and people don't seem to be excited about it. Odell's talented, so in my mind, it really has never been a problem with the talent and the player. Just situations just haven't gone his way. I think week one they probably tried to force it with the Woods injury. They tried to make it more than it was. He was only targeted a few times, and they didn't go. He's not on the same page with his quarterback. It made sense. He'd been in the building for 10 minutes. I don't put the blame on anybody in that point. Just a rough week for everybody in LA. Give him a bye, gives him time to work on rhythm, timing, things like that. I'm actually optimistic that Odell can come in because Odell's more talented than Robert Woods. As much as Robert Woods has been very good in his career, I think Odell has a better physical talent, physical skill set to him that I think he can be very good in this offense. I just don't, because he hasn't had an offense to work or an off season to work in the offense, it makes things just a more of a challenge. We talked pre-show about the importance of rhythm and letting players get into a rhythm together. Well, Odell's not going to be in a rhythm. They're going to give him a certain set of plays that he's going to know and routes that he can run, and they're going to do that. That's why I like Van Jefferson here with Odell, because Van Jefferson is more comfortable with his quarterback. So in a pinch, both of these guys are going to have some value to this offense, I think. So wide receiver 2 doesn't feel too high for either of these guys because both of them can be a big play threat and stretch the defense. So I don't hate it. I'm soured on them. I'm just kind of over it because I think the name value is more than the fantasy production over the last 3 years.
That's fair.
There's some safer plays. There's some ceiling plays. Cedric Wilson, if the top 2 receivers are out, he could be a really sneaky play because he could wind up this weekend being the most targeted wide receiver on the roster going into Thursday night. When you look at the flex tier, is there anything that stands out to you? Anybody that you really like in this tier that you feel comfortable with?
Robbie Anderson seems like he's at least gained some value from the depths of not having any value, which, I mean, you had in the 4 weeks prior to week 10, he hadn't hit even 30 yards receiving, and at least in the past 2 weeks, he's gotten 4 or 5 catches with at least 30 yards. He has a touchdown in there, so playing with Cam has reinvigorated him a bit. Nick Westbrook certainly has some value with just the sort of decimated offense that Tennessee's playing with, and they're going to have to throw the ball to someone. That's another one. It's hard with the New England wide receivers as you're never really just sure what's going to be happening with them, who it's going to, or the tight ends. Are they just going to go run heavy? DPJ feels like almost a last man standing because there's an injury to Jarvis Landry. They're not completely sure if he's going to play. But I think, as you've mentioned in other videos, that he gets one big long bomb and gets you a touchdown or just gets you nothing. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of boom or bust in this sort of flex value area. I guess I'm more interested in guys that I think it feels like is clear that are going to be getting targets. Even someone like a Deandre Carter, he's at least been a central part of that passing game where if you're in a PPR format, he's going to get you some catches and yards and maybe a touchdown. And to me, that's safer than some of these situations that are just a mess where I really like Bryan Edwards, but is not just going to be an NFL wide receiver long-term, or it's just a mess of that offense. Some weeks he'll have a great game, and then this last week he disappears. So it's really hard for me to trust a guy like that, or even Laviska Shenault, where Jamal Agnew's out for the year. You'd think, all right, Laviska, he's going to get his chance now, but it feels like they've had that chance in that offense, the coaching staff, to focus on him and get him the ball, and they just don't have interest in it, again, for whatever the reason is. So I'd have a hard time putting my faith in him too.
Well, and I guess the question I have for you, as we move closer, ever so closer to fantasy playoffs, when you're building your lineup, are you trying to pick the safer plays, especially when you look at a flex or some of those positions? What's your mindset when you're building your lineup each week? Are you trying to go for the boom, or are you just trying to be safe, knowing that your big names will carry you and then some of these other guys will give you something?
It really depends on the makeup of my team and how how I feel that no one can completely predict matchups. But if I feel like I'm really strong in other areas, I'm probably going to pick a safer floor for my flex, hoping that, all right, they're going to get me a nice base. And then these other guys, hopefully they boom and go off for me. Whereas if it's a really big matchup where I'm projected to lose by a lot, maybe I am going to plug in a guy there that I think has a chance to completely explode or not show up at all, like a DPJ or Brian Edwards. But some of these guys, it just feels like it's not going to happen for at all, and I'd be looking elsewhere. Sort of that New Orleans offense going against Buffalo. If I'm thinking like, all right, I'm the Saints, what am I doing? I'm probably trying to run the ball a whole bunch, like the Colts had success, and they haven't had the best wide receiver core this year in general. So I'm not really interested in playing those wide receivers for the most part this week.
It's bad when you don't know which receiver core is better, Detroit or New Orleans. The things haven't gone well for you, if that's a debatable question this season. So it's safe to say that this is the nope tier. In case of emergency tier, the please don't let it be tier. There's not a lot here to be excited about because these are extreme boomer busts. Quez had some ups, some downs. James Washington's had some ups, more downs. Olamide is in the right direction because he's getting targeted a little bit more. Preston Williams, maybe. Khalif, way too boomer bust. Josh Reynolds, I saw something just come across the screen that maybe Goff goes this week, and that could be good for Josh Reynolds. But what are you thinking about this tier?
I do have some interest in Zach Pascal and Ty if they play. We've seen a few running backs, especially in the passing game, have some success against Tampa Bay, but it really feels like they're going to have to throw the ball more than they may have recently. And Pittman being the main guy, of course, but someone else is going to have to catch some passes. They're not really looking to the tight ends a whole lot. And Pascal's been okay some weeks. Ty, I haven't honestly looked up at a whole lot this year, but maybe he has a comeback game here. I think they're going to have to throw the ball, and those guys may come into sort of more flex value potentially when all is said and done. Someone in Detroit, to your point, is probably going to be catching the ball there. TJ and Amon-Ra running backs are mainly it. Khalif Raymond's had some great weeks and had some nothing weeks, and Josh Reynolds being newer there. He had signed his contract with Tennessee and just fell out of favor. So maybe it's a Josh Reynolds week nowhere on Thanksgiving. We'll have to see. But yeah, there's just not a whole lot that you really like in this group.
If you guys have enjoyed the content, hopefully you did, smash that like button. We do appreciate it. And we'll talk to you guys later.